This is the story of my friend who went to prison, and why this story isn't far off from happening to any of us. For the sake of the video, I'm going to be calling my friend Charlie. Charlie came over to the States from Belgium with a dream. He wanted to become a businessman. And we were enrolled together at community college. We spent tons of days playing basketball, FIFA, all the sort of adventures and things that you want to be doing with somebody when you're about to start your life and your journey and you have time. And time is of the essence, and I'll be getting into that later. As we were playing, I always got the sense that Charlie was a little physical in the post, right? He would back you down, throw out a sky hook, and then if you got a little bit physical back, he might mumble something. He might be like, oh, I really didn't like that. And you'd always be wondering about those mumbles, be like, what is he trying to say over there, you know? But you could catch it over time and be like, okay, he's actually just a little frustrated about the way that you got physical with him. And I think if I paid more attention to that, I might have been able to get a little bit of a foreshadow on why he would end up in prison. But if we're honest with ourselves, that mumble, that little voice in us, is there for all of us, right? If somebody steps on your toes, you're like, hey, you stepped on my toes. You know, you might not express it, but you got it in your mind. If somebody bumps up to you, I remember one time somebody in Egypt, they bumped against me. I dropped my phone and I broke my $400 phone, right? And I was like, oh, no, it's cool. I picked up the phone and I walked off, right? And what happens over time is things start to stack up. They start to build. And for Charlie, he would always just give you little hints, right? We'd play FIFA together. He'd beat me game after game after game, and I would taunt him, even though I was losing, just because I was a sore loser. So I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna kick your ass next game. And he'd usually win, right? But even those little taunts would be like, oh, he'd be like, oh, okay, and a little mumble or something, you know? Then he moved on from community college. He had something of a gap year because of some bureaucratic stuff, some paperwork that didn't go in. So he was getting even more anxious. He was like, I need to start my job. I need to start my career. He went to Clemson, did 4 years there, worked his ass off, got himself into Atlanta. Started rooming with someone he didn't know. Now, this guy that he roomed with was a bottom feeder. He used Charlie's PlayStation. Sometimes he ate his food. He left dishes in the sink. Straight up, you could not imagine a worse roommate. And Charlie would come back and be like, hey man, don't play with my PlayStation. Or, hey, stop eating my food. And the guy would stop for like a few weeks, and then Charlie would come back. At the time, he hadn't found work yet. He was working at a restaurant after a long day of work, and he'd find that his roommate was playing with his PlayStation, and that in particular would get him. So one day, after a few months of that, he comes back, and he goes and he opens the drawer to the cutlery, and he finds his fork with half an eaten olive. He turns around, his friend's playing on his PlayStation again. And the flip switches. He runs for his friend, he punches him in the eye, he chokes him for 30 seconds, and leaves him on the ground with a face more purple than a bruised eggplant. Charlie goes back to his room, locks the door, and lets off the rest of the emotional stress. Meanwhile, his roommate calls a friend. They chat it up. What do we do? Yada, yada. He calls the cops. Cops come over, arrest Charlie on attempted murder. And Charlie leaves his phone there. With no numbers, no one to call, and he's locked in prison for over 3 weeks. Until a family member from Belgium reaches out, saying, hey, we haven't heard from Charlie in a while. And the police identify him, like, yeah, we have a black man in this prison. And Charlie finally gets out around a month later. And that whole month he spent wondering if he would ever get bail, wondering if he would ever find his way out of prison. And for an attempted murder that might last you a lifetime in prison, he was quite relieved to find that he was free again. Although, not without the charge and the case. So why am I sharing this with you guys? Well, there comes a point in all of our lives where we are like Charlie. We find ourselves in a work situation, or with a person, in a relationship, or a friendship, or a roommate, and we know this isn't working. I call this moment the jig is up. And you know when the jig is up. You're able to intuit it. You can feel it. It's coming from, like, this isn't working anymore. You're being strained. You're being bottlenecked. You go to work. You see the same old habits. You see people procrastinating. Guy with the beer belly drinking Mountain Dew while he's watching YouTube videos instead of working on the team project. Woman out here, she's not paying attention either. Then you have the boss, and he's going on the same spiel that you've heard 1,000 times. Or in the relationship where you clearly express yourself, say like, hey, I don't like it when you do that, and for the umpteenth time they do that. Or you get caught in repetitive behavior where it's on again, off again, you break up, you're back with that person. Or even worse, the situation becomes completely untenable to where you're strangling and damn near choking each other every time you see them. And you put up with it. Why do you put up with it? Right? Why do you live in an environment that is unsafe? Right? And we can take it a step further. Why do you live where you live? Right? And for Charlie, that was his place where he was staying. It could even be where you're at right now in your life. Right? Like the physical location. You know? And I think that if you really, really understand the detriment that people will have on you and an environment will have on you, on your emotional state, and how all that anger is seething beneath and it's waiting to come out, and that chickens will come home to roost, you won't put up with that shit. You'll put a stop to it. You stomp and put your foot down. And most people won't take that position. And it's because they're afraid. They're afraid of what's on the other side. They're afraid of making a change to their life and standing up for themselves in a way that they've never stood up before. And sometimes it's very real and tangible repercussions like, wait, how do I find another lease? Or how do I afford a certain place? Or am I going to be able to find a new boyfriend or girlfriend or partner? These are real questions that you have to deal with, especially after you put so much time, work, and effort. For Charlie, it was 7 years, and he finally found himself in a life situation that he was like, I'm going to get a job in Atlanta. Or prison. And I think a lot of us find ourselves in that prison. And what are the consequences of that prison? I'm going to get into that, but please hit like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me create these videos. The consequences of that prison is that meanwhile your emotional state is one of turmoil. You're in ruins, you're a wreck, right? And you suppress it. And you suppress it to the extent that you don't really see, because it's all in the unconscious. You don't see how it's festering on the daily. But then one day is going to come where you show up to work, and that one little document that you're supposed to have, right, that you're given, it's got a little dog ear on it. Small little thing about this big. You see that dog ear, and you're like, who the fuck ruined my paper? Boom. Big explosion. Or you're in a relationship, and your girlfriend calls. Hey, honey, I'll be home at 8. She comes home at 8:15. And you're like, what are you doing here so late? Or you're walking around the same neighborhood for the 50th time. Take a smell. Think you're going to take a fresh breath of air. The garbage man just drove by. emptied out the garbage bin, and you smell a huge waft of disgusting air. And that's when it clicks. You missed the boat. The jig was up way back when. Sometimes if it's a marriage, the jig was up 40 years ago. And you're still being dragged around on a chain like a dog. I know this one guy shows up at the cafe and his wife, sweet couple. His wife's like 80 years old, got herself a nice wig. The guy mopes around behind her like this, head down, silent. They always come and talk to me. They've talked to me at least maybe 40 times. They think I'm very approachable. But when I say they, I mean she. I've never seen the guy say a single word. Always moping around behind her like a little dog. Meanwhile, she's like, yeah, I found him at a train station. I was looking for somebody at the time because I was getting old and I couldn't have kids. And I just thought he would be the perfect husband. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it went along this. And I picked him out. She said that, I remember. I picked him out. And Tom's been so great for me. And of course she was a strong feminist figure. And her man was like this. Just moping around. Nice, quiet, nice, you know. And, well, that's what happens. That's what happens, because if you don't say, hey, the jig is up, you're going to be on that leash or in that prison, right? You're going to be stuck in a situation that you can't get out of. And what do you have as a consequence? The emotional state, the lost time, years you might never get back, right? Meanwhile, that whole time you could have been searching for something greater and better for yourself, right? But you, out of fear, you never took that shot, right? Or you just couldn't convince yourself that that you were capable of taking it. It's not that difficult to move, right? And even if it is, sometimes you can get a sublease, right? Sometimes you can go crash at a friend's house. Hey, sometimes you can just talk to the landlord and maybe that'll fix the situation. Instead of being like, and then explosion. And then finally, you fantasize. You're in that life situation, the jig was up way back when, and you're like, well, one of these days, I'll get over into that city on the sand and live my life, or be by the mountains, or, you know, have that sunshine or that snow that I've always dreamed about. Guess what? That day ain't coming. We both know that day ain't coming. Because the decisions you don't make now are going to be the decisions that never come to fruition. Right? You can make a plan, but if you don't start plotting the points, that plan is worthless. And the consequences, you could find yourself like my friend. In a penitentiary in Atlanta, in a dark room with shitty food, right? Wondering, how did I find myself here? You're going to be looking up, all you're going to see is walls. How did I find myself here? Meanwhile, people, they'll keep fantasizing. They'll be in that room with the walls and be like, hey, maybe I can dig my way out, break through a wall, escape through some sort of imaginary window, right? They're going to be talking to themselves for years. They're going to have that mental loop in their mind, right? All the possible life scenarios and the anxiety building up. And you ain't breaking out of that prison. That prison's got a guard keeper and it's surrounded by an army. Good luck, right? It's your mistake for falling into that prison. So I'm telling you, hey, take back the key to your life before it comes to that, right? If you think about it, when I say the jig is up, it's not a jigsaw puzzle, right? Because when it's up, you can't put it back together. It's done. The pieces didn't fit, and they never will. And you gotta know, by feeling it from your soul, that shit just didn't work. And unless you want to find yourself like my friend Charlie, identify it from the get-go and nip the bud. See, people are like trees. You don't see a tree one day, leave, let's say it was a dogwood, come out the next day and inspect like a maple tree. You know? You don't expect an oak wood. You don't expect that 10-foot tall tree has now grown into like a behemoth. It might have changed a few millimeters. It didn't quadruple in size. It's still the same damn tree. So you need to know that about people, about work environments. If they didn't work out in the past, why would they work out now? If a relationship didn't work out in the past, why would it work out now? If the place you're at in your life didn't work out in the past, why are you there now? You cut that out. Because the repercussions of not making that decision, of not changing your tune, if you're lucky, it's just lost time. If you're unlucky, like my friend, it's a case of attempted murder.